is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and I've got another detailed forecast update coming at you your way for Tuesday, the 28th of October, 2025. There's heaps of detail in this forecast update, including rainfall through Southeast Queensland that's coming through today, which could turn heavy at times later tonight. Plenty of showers and thunderstorms as well through central and northern parts of Queensland, and also an outbreak expected into the first week of November through Southeast Queensland, and just a general overview on what we're talking tropical-wise and also in the southeast. If you're brand new to the channel, please do consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things this morning with the current situation of rainfall and storms sweeping in towards southeastern Queensland for the first time in this kind of capacity in the last couple of months. This is really good stuff that we're seeing, and already the rainfall shaping up to be a lot heavier than initially expected. I was only expecting to wake up to some general light to moderate showers through southeast Queensland, but we're already waking up with some heavier stuff, particularly towards the south of Brisbane, down on the Gold Coast, and a couple of locations have already picked up 25 millimeters, which means today's rainfall is likely going to end up being a lot more significant and a lot heavier than we initially expected. And also, another great factor from this rainfall is the fact that the temperatures have dropped dramatically from yesterday's top of nearly 40 degrees through wide parts of southeast Queensland, now half at about 20 to 22 degrees Celsius today. So a much more pleasant day through southeast Queensland. But again, this rainfall, very, very good. It's still coming in, and we're expecting a lot more of it to occur throughout the course of today. You can see that this rainfall is beginning to get quite heavy at times. There are some heavier falls occurring down on the Gold Coast. A lot of this is more sort of that sporadic large raindrop type stuff. So there isn't an awful lot of rainfall accumulating from what looks to be quite heavy stuff down here, but 30 to 50 millimeters an hour in a few of these showers, and they're sustaining for a significant amount of time, which means that these rainfall accumulations are now very quickly beginning to add up. Now, rainfall is expected to continue throughout the remainder of this morning, but it is going to pick up as we get into this afternoon and this evening, and this is when we're going to see the development of this low pressure system and potentially a convergence zone develop through southeast Queensland or northeast New South Wales. And considering the magnitude of the rainfall that we're seeing already, I definitely reckon some heavy falls are now a possibility later tonight, which is great news. There's pretty much nothing bad about this rainfall coming through because it isn't going to be enough to cause flooding. There's no nasties involved either. This is just really good stuff. This is great rainfall coming through for southeast Queensland. Now, you see what I mean here. This low pressure system by around 10 o'clock tonight begins to exit the southeast Queensland coastline, and it throws up a 3 to 6 hour period of heavy rainfall just towards the south of it, and that's what we call a convergence zone, where these winds, which are coming out of the north and the northeast, meet up with these southeasterly winds, and that moisture creates a ton of cloud cover and a ton of thunderstorm activity in one certain zone. But that's why we get such significant rainfall accumulations from shower events in North Queensland. It's also why east coast lows can bring such significant rainfall down on the New South Wales coastline, and we're going to be seeing a pretty similar fashion type weather event as we get out later tonight. Now, this low pressure system pulls away pretty quickly from the coastline, so we're not talking about a sustained 12-hour period of heavy rainfall, but definitely some significant and potentially heavy rainfall accumulations between 8 o'clock tonight and 2 o'clock tomorrow morning in Queensland, and of course 9 o'clock tonight to 3 o'clock tomorrow morning through the northeast of New South Wales is now a possibility before this rainfall clears off by around 4 or 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. For both states respectively. This low pressure system then pulls itself out into the Tasman Sea, and whilst a few showers are expected to linger here and there, and we will see a bit of a thunderstorm outbreak on Wednesday afternoon and evening along the Capricornia and Fraser coastlines, there's not much expected in the way of southeast Queensland significant severe weather until at least Friday or Saturday later this week. Let's talk about those rainfall accumulations before we get ahead of ourselves and look at this weekend and later this week. But you can see some significant rainfall accumulations are expected, and this is just a look over the next 36 hours across southeast Queensland. Significant rainfall accumulations on top of what has already fallen could be around that 50 to 60 millimeters towards the north of Brisbane in the Ivanhoe Outlook, an area that we have highlighted for seeing some potentially significant rainfall from this rainfall event, I guess you could call it. And then over the border into the northeast of New South Wales, wide swathes of falls between 50 to 70 millimeters are expected, with some isolated totals up to 100 millimeters also now a possibility. The convective forecast models, I believe, are saying it best. This is a look at the Access convective forecast model, which is generally a very high resolution and very accurate forecast model, but today it is throwing out a few interesting bits and bobs. It's really not calling for much rainfall into the scenic rim or the Brisbane area, which I don't think is true. I think that we are going to see, generally speaking, the same rainfall that we're seeing on the forecast here up the Sunshine Coast, brought a little bit further down into the Brisbane and the Gold Coast area. And what I mean by that is that Brisbane is looking at, again, at least that 30 to 50 millimeter type rainfall accumulations on top of what has already fallen, and you can also see some sporadic rainfall accumulations up into the triple figures possible into the Ivanhoe Outlook, and then further south into the northeast of New South Wales. Now, this rainfall is not enough to kick off flooding or significant flash flooding either. It will be enough to cause some rather large puddles and really soak up the garden, which would be very nice. Heading into the wet season, though, it is a bit of a concern to see 130 millimetres of rainfall, which is kind of the maximum of what the forecast models have been suggesting. But it is a little bit concerning to see this type of rainfall coming through just before the wet season kicks off. But I do think that this is, for the most part, good news across Southeast Queensland. They've been very dry over the last couple of weeks with that SSW event, and it was only last weekend where we start to see some rainfall develop from thunderstorms, and even that wasn't far-reaching. There were still places that missed out. So to see rainfall like this coming through is very, very good news indeed. It makes me very, very happy to see it and very, very happy to be able to report on it. And like I said, heavier than what we did initially expect across North Stradbroke and South Stradbroke Island. You can see some of these falls here are now beginning to really pick up into the moderate type threshold, and then further inland as well, up around Caboolture into the Samford Valley, sporadic moderate falls are occurring there, and then like I said, into the Wivenhoe outlook as well, some sporadic moderate rainfall accumulations, which are only going to continue to build as the day draws on. Let's talk about the rainfall that's going to be coming through later today. You can see lots of rainfall is expected as well across the northern parts of the Sunshine Coast, and then inland across central Queensland and along the Capricornia coastline. Lots of thunderstorm activity, lots of shower activity, looking very healthy up there, and we could potentially be talking about some severe thunderstorm activity once again. Yesterday was pretty lackluster. We didn't have too much in the way of healthy conditions for severe thunderstorms, but we still saw a strong thunderstorm blow through Maryborough towards the south of Hervey Bay along the Sunshine Coast. Today, the convective available potential energy further inland through Queensland is not overly favourable for strong severe thunderstorms. North of Taroom and outside of Rolleston, we may see some strong thunderstorms develop, but most likely of the non-severe variety. And then further north, closer to the Capricornia coastline, and then up into the North Queensland coastline inland from Mackay, is when these Cape values do begin to increase once again, and they do look quite healthy and potentially conducive for a severe thunderstorm outbreak later this afternoon and this evening. One thing's for sure is big thunderstorms are expected along the North Queensland coastline, north of Mackay, right up to Cardwell and into the Atherton tablelands. We've got insane convective available potential energy values throughout the course of today, and a lot of moisture sweeping in from the Coral Sea. So conditions are primed for some big disorganized pulse thunderstorm activity. Now, normally when we look at Cape values like this, we start thinking we're going to have a cracker severe thunderstorm outbreak, but not so fast. We don't really have that dry slot in the environment. There's not an awful lot in the way of wind shear either. So for the most part, through the Burdekin River catchment, which is where these thunderstorms are going to be at their strongest throughout the course of today, it's just going to be big pulse thunderstorm stacks that drop a lot of rainfall very quickly, throw out a lot of lightning, and potentially have some small hailstones. But in terms of really nasty severe thunderstorm impacts like large to potentially giant hailstones and damaging to locally destructive wind gusts, we're not expecting much in the way of those in those thunderstorms that we'll see later today. But yeah, definitely a lot of lightning is expected. We're looking at some of these thunderstorms throwing out potentially thousands of bolts in a pretty short period of time, and a lot of lightning also expected as we get closer to the Gulf country and into the western or northwestern corner of Queensland, north of Cloncurry and Mount Isa. And like I said, good thunderstorms expected about as far south as Taroom, but most likely inland from Billawheeler and the Capricornia coastline, and then across towards Rolleston in this isolated pocket of central Queensland. So a few scattered and isolated thunderstorms forecast in here, and then they become a little bit more widespread the further north we go. And like I said, we have to push this forecast well out into this weekend to really begin to talk about the next thunderstorm chance through southeast Queensland. Friday could bring the chance of a few thunderstorms here and there. It's certainly going to be hot enough through some locations of southeast Queensland and along the Sunshine Coast. Temperatures are expected to go into the high 20s and early 30s once again, and some potentially strong thunderstorms are a possibility on the northern side of the Capricornia, on the Sunshine Coast and into the Capricornia and Fraser coastline as well, and potentially into the North Burnett forecast district. In terms of Brisbane and the Gold Coast, it doesn't really look like a great setup for severe thunderstorm activity. There will be the chance of it at this point in time, but wind shear is pretty much the only factor that looks favourable for these severe thunderstorms. There's okay Cape, and the temperatures do look to be okay, but we're not looking at any one factor being a home run apart from that wind shear, and that's just not going to be enough to get severe thunderstorms off the ground through southeast Queensland on Friday. Saturday brings a better chance. You can see this energy sweeping deep into Queensland, and that presents the big risk of thunderstorms a lot further inland as well. So talking St George, Roma, Injune, Taroom, even further inland of Chinchilla and right out towards Charleville and Orcathella, temperatures are going to get quite warm out here, which means pulse thunderstorm modes do look to be expected on Saturday. And again, looking at the sounding, whilst we do have some half decent wind shear, the environment overall looks to be rather dry for these thunderstorms. So again, it looks like Saturday may be another hit or miss day further out in towards Queensland, and I don't think it's going to get hot enough through southeast Queensland to present us with the risk of widespread thunderstorm activity. So we can pretty much discount the chances of significant thunderstorms through southeast Queensland on Saturday. Again, that chance does fire up again on Sunday, but once again, doesn't look like it's going to get hot enough until we get much further inland. Overall, I think you can paint a pretty general picture right now is that thunderstorms are going to be on the forecast and they're going to fire up here and there, but they're going to be very far inland out towards central and then out towards western Queensland, because it's just not going to get hot enough closer to the coastline at this point in time. Of course, temperatures are likely to increase on the forecast models as they normally do, but it really doesn't look like this weekend is going to present us with a widespread risk of severe thunderstorms, not at least in the Brisbane or the Gold Coast area. Further inland, the chances, like I said, do begin to increase, but we may be looking at a lot further out into November to see our next chance of a widespread severe thunderstorm outbreak through southeast Queensland. So will be one to watch, that's for sure. You can see as we push this right out towards mid-November, there are a few thunderstorms and a few shower events that do pop up onto the forecast, and some hot weather is expected to seep in towards Brisbane and the Gold Coast once again, as it normally does at this time of the year. But overall, it looks like it is going to be a relatively quiet picture after whatever the chances are this weekend, between about the 4th of November out to about the 11th. It looks like we are going to have that dry out 7-day period that we've been talking about around the mid parts of October. And generally speaking, that's what goes for Queensland as well. November is expected to be a rather wet month across Queensland, but it is going to start off rather quiet and on the back foot. We will still see shower and thunderstorm activity, particularly through the first 3 days of November, particularly along the Capricornia and North Queensland coastlines. But overall, it looks like we've got a pretty tame picture, at least to start off the first 2 weeks of November, and I do expect this wet weather to return after about the 20th of November. So that's just my long range take at this point in time. Not seeing anything in the way of significant rumbles out until about the 10th or the 11th of November. That will change though about 10 days thereafter. So again, North Queensland definitely going to be a place to watch, and especially as we enter into the busy months of the year and the business season of the wet season, the business end of the wet season, we will be talking about plenty of rainfall events, plenty of thunderstorm events, and then eventually tropical lows and tropical cyclones. They will not be on the radar. They will be on the radar very, very soon. They're not quite on it right now, but they will be very, very soon, mark my words. Then into the Northern Territory and Western Australia, we do have lots of thunderstorm activity forecast, particularly in the next 2 weeks, but also in the next week, we do have an abundance of thunderstorm activity forecast across the northern parts of the NT, and that's in typical late October, early November fashion. We're seeing these thunderstorms really do begin to pipe up, and on quite a consistent basis, which is very good to see in true build-up fashion. So Wednesday, Thursday, tomorrow, and the next day, lots of thunderstorm activity through the Northern Territory, and then out towards Friday into the Kimberley region, and again on Saturday and Sunday through the Kimberley region. It's going to be hot there, and then returning back into the Northern Territory on Monday and Tuesday before a couple of days of dry conditions are forecast. After about the 4th of November, we might be entering into a nationwide quiet week after about the 4th of November, but looking good for Western Australia. Lots of rain and thunder through the Kimberley region, and because it is going to be from thunderstorms that are going to fire up on a pretty consistent basis over the next week, there's not going to be many places that miss out, which is again very good news. And just having a look at Southern Australia, we do now have some significant rainfall, but that's very much on the long range back end of the forecast across southeastern Australia into the Gippsland region of Victoria. And like I said, today and tomorrow bringing shower activity to a wide swathe of the New South Wales coastline, including some showers that are expected as far south as the Illawarra coastline. But again, nothing too crazy is expected. General falls between 20 to 30 millimetres, with some isolated totals to 40 millimetres are a possibility. Unfortunately for Victoria, it is remaining dry for the remainder of October, but as we get out towards the first week of November, likely some rainfall expected to return around the 3rd or the 4th from a bit of a cold front that's going to sweep through. And this has been on our radar for a while. We may see a large low pressure system develop into the Tasman Sea. We may not. We're going to have to keep an eye on this one, but if it does develop, then it looks like a week period between the 3rd out to about the 8th or the 9th of November could bring some wet weather to the Gippsland coastline and just through eastern Victoria and parts of southeastern New South Wales in general. It is a feature to keep an eye on, but again, likely to be downgraded and likely to have its rainfall accumulations as well bumped down on the forecast models, just considering the general trend that we've been seeing over the last couple of months. One to watch and one to keep in the back of our heads, however. Anyways, that is going to do it for today's weather forecast update. I do hope you found it enjoyable and informative, and if you have, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. A special shout out to the channel sponsors updated from yesterday. Much appreciated to everybody that has signed up to get their name on this list. It is massively appreciated, that's for sure. And if you do want to get name mentioned at this part of the video in every single forecast update and weather update, then click the join button down below. It's a small price to pay and it really helps us here at CyclonesOZ, so thank you so much for that. Later today, I will have a update on the tropical cyclone forecast across northern Australia. I'm excited to release that one to you guys, and it is a big comprehensive update on what we're expecting tropical cyclone wise for season 2025-26, so subscribe for that if you haven't already. That's going to do it for me, and I'll catch you on the next storm. Goodbye.